Welcome to Pressure Point. I'm Brad Newcombe. Award-winning author Sheila Baxter's most recent book is called A Child is Not a Toy. And in this book, she reminds us that it was in November 1989 that the Canadian Parliament passed a resolution with the goal of eliminating poverty among Canadian children by the year 2000. And with all the cutbacks happening, children are going hungry. And Sheila tells the stories in their own words of hungry and poor children in the book, A Child is Not a Toy. The question is, why the cutbacks and why child poverty? Welcome, Sheila.
Hi.
It's good to have you here.
Yeah, hi. Hi.
Hi. You were here a long time ago with your other book, Under the Viaduct, which you won an award for. Congratulations.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Now, you've got this reminder in the book that by the year 2000...
We're supposed to eliminate child poverty, yet it's worse. You know, like how they plan to eliminate child poverty is by lowering the poverty line. You know, like if a child has 2 pieces of bread to take to school, well, the poverty line is only 1 piece of bread. It's how in 5 years they're going to eliminate child poverty when it's just horrendous what's happening out there. Like,
what did you went out and talked to children who are poor? I mean, how did you do that? Just say a little bit. And what did you find? How did you do it? And
I think mostly I'm poor myself, so it's easier to find poor people when you're poor. They're your friends.
Right.
They're the people you meet. They're your community. So just interviewed, and then like I got a lot of sketches for children. Children that couldn't talk about their poverty would draw their poverty. So maybe
show some of these pictures.
Especially they were small, yeah.
Here's one here.
Go ahead.
A mom and child, only 3 things in the fridge, and they're listed here: milk, bread, and apple, and no supper.
That's from a Stevie, age 8. This was either done from Crabtree Corners or one of the schools in the east side. And see the expression on the mum's face and the expression on the kid's face. Children's are, they don't lie, children, when they do their feelings, you know, like, let's try another one here.
Okay.
Like, this was a little
Let's try this one here.
This is the saddest. This was, I think, from, maybe from the Crabtree Corners.
And this is from Kelly, age 7.
Yeah.
What do you think being poor means? And the answer is going to bed hungry.
And she says she's got this kid lying down and there's very little blankets and it just shows, you know, the mouth is down, the eyes are down. I mean, this is...
Let's look at this one here. This one is a bit busier picture. I mean...
Yeah, the missing M. This little girl was on the street at 11.
And it's maybe hard to see. It says the mystery of the missing letter.
I mean, and you know, this guy's got a key, so I think he's probably a pimp or a John, taking the kid up to a motel, you see, or a hotel.
Is that common among kids who
There's child
poor?
prostitution. There's a lot of child prostitution happens. The little girl that's 11, when I interviewed her in the book, she's 14 now, said, well, I'm not into prostitution yet. I just let some of these old men fill me up for $5. Should I use the money for bus fare and lunch for school?
And does she tell anybody, or does she just let that go?
She's now that she's in the book. It's a long, sad story of child abuse.
There's a lot of sad stories in the book.
Yeah, you know, like...
Unfortunately,
a lot of... sorry to interrupt you. What happens is a kid is poor. Some of them make it. Many do. But some finish up like somebody comes along, buys them some clothes, and prostitutes the child, right? Or other, you have these people like quite rich people come down and they'll pick up a kid, take them home for the weekend, give them drugs, cocaine, and then at the end of the weekend just throw the kid back on the street. Child prostitution is at an all-time high in Vancouver,
and I suppose
for male and female.
And it gets higher, I'm sure, as the economy gets worse, as there's more and more people who are out of work and so on.
But if you're starving and you have no food and you have no clothes and you have nowhere to go, I asked that question once. Sometimes pushing drugs or sex, selling sex is the only option. For starving, you know.
One final picture here, and this one is a family has no milk, no home, no bed, and they feel mad and sad, and they don't have no cups or plates, no clothes from an 8-year-old.
Yep.
One of the things I noticed...
And these are Canadian children.
These are kids in Vancouver.
Canadian children.
In your book, you talk...
Not third world kids.
Canadian.
Our Canadian children.
Right here in our very own neighborhoods.
That's
and in our doorsteps.
That's right, and getting poorer.
And going to our schools.
And
one of the things that when I read this book that you talk about is that the children who are poor or adults who remember their time as kids
Yeah.
being poor, one thing they have in common is they often have really bad memories
A
of
prejudice
school,
in school.
teachers,
Like, for instance,
fellow students.
this little boy, they called him Welfare Wally in school because his mom was on welfare. And like the prejudice in school, because poverty isn't taught, some schools, most schools, poverty isn't taught. Teachers have a choice. They can teach in social studies anything they think is the right thing, right? Poverty isn't taught in all the schools, so consequently, the child that's poor in school doesn't know why he or she is poor. The child that's not poor doesn't know why that child is poor. So if a child is poor, oh, you're welfare Wally, or you're welfare Pauline, you're no good, your mother's a welfare bum, dad's a welfare bum. But if the teachers taught where poverty comes from, how everybody's equal, that being poor doesn't mean you're not a good person.
Yeah, well, and you address one of the ways to do that, don't
Yeah.
you, in the book?
In the back of the book.
You've got these appendixes of...
How to teach in school on child poverty. Yeah, my grandson illustrated them.
And say a little bit about what you've done, because you say, my name is Grandma Baxter.
Yeah.
And then you tell stories, and the kids tell them in their own voices.
That's right. And until we educate about poverty, even if we got closer to the poverty line, right? Unless we educate in schools so that children are not scarred when they're in school because they're poor. I had a horrendous time in school because I was poor. How about you?
Well, I was sort of middle class, but I grew up in a rural
You told
area.
me before you were poor in school.
Oh no! Well, we were all the same. Maybe working class. I mean, I was in a rural area. It was a
Yeah.
three-room school.
Yeah.
A little village of 325 people.
Uh-huh.
So there.
Was there any kids who had more money than you were jealous of?
Some people did things that I was jealous of.
Yeah.
I wasn't so conscious of. We were all kind of the same. We felt the same. In a rural area, you know, it's a pretty sort of a farming community, and it felt the same.
I think it's a lot easier to be poor in a
so.
farming community where everybody's poor.
We were kind of the hayseeds and the hicks, and when we went to high school in the town, then we were prejudiced.
You mean you're middle class hay kids in the Hicks?
Sort of thing, yeah.
You're confusing me. Let's get on with it. Let's get on.
But I think what you've done here is you've done
yeah.
some really good
Thanks,
stories,
yeah.
like you talk about it from the point of view of a kid in a wheelchair,
yeah.
or somebody who's on welfare and the check hasn't come through, somebody who, you know, doesn't speak English very well.
English isn't their first language, yeah.
Yeah, or somebody who goes to the food bank for food.
That's right.
Those kind of things.
So the thing we have to address is, as a society, what are we doing about this? Like just raising welfare rates or making these jobs available that are not available, or never will be available. I don't know, but until we start saying, okay, you're poor, it's not your fault you're poor. We take these children and say, you're a sweet, loving child, you have a right to be equal, you're all born equal. Being poor isn't a social disease.
One of the things is that children don't choose to be poor.
Right.
I mean, you underline that over and over in the book.
Yeah.
But there's tremendous consequences, aren't they, when they grow up? I mean, there are limited possibilities.
You see, you're always going to get people say, I was poor, we were 12 children, and we made it. I made it. You made it.
Right.
But there are many kids that don't make it. That's the point. And like, I'm confused because I don't know the answer. Because money isn't the only solution. And okay, I have one solution. We have to love all children. Not some children that are white, well-mannered, middle class, we love them, but children that might be children of color, native children, children that are poor, maybe not well-dressed going to school, they're not loved equally.
And do we value children as a society in your
No,
mind?
I can give an instance of going to, getting somebody to take her kids to Sunday school because get some role models or whatever. It was a mistake. You know what happened? This mother was on welfare, and I won't tell you what church it was. It's in Vancouver. And it was a very wealthy church. She was sent a letter telling how much she was expected to pledge each month.
Yeah.
It was $8, and she was on welfare. And she didn't, and that was if she wanted to continue sending her kid to this Sunday school.
And of course, they face the same thing in schools and
Same
recreation.
thing, excuse me, and same thing in churches and in Sunday school too.
Yeah.
That's what horrifies. It's bad enough in school. Can you imagine it happening in the church?
Yeah. And again, an insensitivity to all the different kind of.
Well, you
positions
probably
we're in.
got some middle class what do you call these people in the church? Not the minister, the people in between that run things. Say, oh, well, everybody should give minimum $8, and they don't realize that $8 might be 3 meals, you know, like for that family. It's this total ignorance.
And where people might be coming from.
That's
and
right.
children certainly aren't going to say anything.
Yeah.
They often take it out against their parents. Yeah.
True.
We have run out of time because we have another section to the program, but I want to thank you, Sheila, for being here, and I want to recommend everyone to read your book, A Child Is Not a Toy.
It's nice being with you, Brad. You're a sweetie.
Oh, it's nice to be with you, too. Thank you. I've been talking with Sheila Baxter, the award-winning author, and her most recent book is A Child Is Not a Toy, available in bookstores in British Columbia. Pressure Point will be right back when we talk with a panel of people who are running a breakfast program for hungry kids.
Welcome to Pressure Point. My name is Marilou, Carrillo. We will be talking about a very interesting and creative partnership and collaboration among inner city children and their families, educators, and a church congregation. Welcome. Milton Sue is the chair of the Stewardship and Social Concern Committee of St. Stephen's United Church. Liz Allen is the principal of Nightingale School, and Gary Gaudin is the minister of St. Stephen's United Church. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how did this partnership happen?
Nightingale is one of the 9 original inner city schools, and as such has recognized over a number of years the need to support children in a very full service model where children are supported not just in their educational program but also meeting the basic needs of children through food, clothing, and trying to help with the housing also. We already had a lunchtime program which is provided by the Ministry of Education, and we had an unofficial breakfast program. But we were approached by the Associate Superintendent to say that there was a church interested in providing some funding for our breakfast program. So it made it official.
Yeah, so what kind of school is Nightingale, first of all?
Nightingale is a school of 340 students. There is about 28 different nationalities represented. It's an 84% poverty level at the school, with about 15% being First Nations students. It's in an area of the city where there is a high crime rate, there is prostitution, and there is a great deal of parents who are new immigrants to Canada who are struggling, who are refugees, and who are really trying to make their life in Canada work, but are very, very poor.
So from the point of view of the congregation at St. Stephen's, how and why did this strike a chord?
St. Stephen's United Church has been looking for an outreach project for a long time, and we examined many projects. And we were introduced to this committee by a trustee of the school, Mrs. McCormick, and we visited a couple of inner city schools which already had this breakfast program, and we were very impressed by the needs of the inner city schools. We are a West Side church, only about 20 blocks from the inner city school, Nightingale Elementary, and we were quite astounded by the abject poverty, the abuse the children suffered, whether it's sexual, physical, or mental. So we were very quickly settled on this as our outreach project.
And we don't usually think of Vancouver as having these sharp contrasts, do we? It's when you describe an affluent West Side community and then a very poverty-stricken school community. So it's interesting that this would be a basis of this partnership program, this breakfast program, based on this very sharp contrast. So what, how does the breakfast program actually look like? How does it work?
I think it works, and maybe I could tell you a story about the needs and then explain to you how it works. We have a lot of children that come to school hungry, and children cannot work academically in school all the way through the day if they're hungry. I remember a little boy who was a grade 5 boy who we were increasingly becoming concerned about. There was no work being done at school. There was a deep inner anger. The child was not being looked after school hours. He would be sleeping on neighbors' doorsteps. He would be locked out of his own house. There was nowhere for him to be. And one day the anger broke. And he sat in my office and he sat on my knee, a grade 5 boy, and he cried. And this was the first time we'd seen tears. And the tears just flowed. And I said, "What can I do for you?" And he said, "Just ask my mother to be there for me." And that was something we couldn't do. We tried, but we couldn't. But we could meet his basic needs. We could feed him, and we could clothe him, and we could help him. So the food program in the morning helps to feed children like this little boy. Gives them a good start to their day, helps to keep the stress level down. All the research says that breakfast is the best meal of the day. It helps their academic performance. It gets them to school.
And certainly as educators, it's not the first thing that would have come to your mind in teacher training is to be involved in feeding children. So Gary, you came from Montreal and this partnership was on its way. What did that look like from your point of view?
It was almost astounding, to watch the committee go through the process of trying to finalize the project that it would work on, to be introduced to the quality of care that you see amongst the staff at a school like Nightingale and other inner-city schools, to watch the care that they want to give and try hard to give, to see the care that the church has to give, to watch that kind of marriage come about was almost a gift of grace itself.
So what did you see when you talk about the care that you were beginning to see
What we
here?
saw when we toured the inner-city school with Sandy McCormick was teachers who really loved their kids, who would be there early for them, to do whatever they could for them, stay late to make sure they had a place to stay in because they might not be able to get back into their homes, who would develop incredible listening skills so that they could spend quality time with those children, and maybe for the only time in that whole day, that child would know that somebody cared enough to really hear the pain and the anguish. See the kids respond to those teachers and to the rest of the staff. It was just a really special experience. And then think that some small thing that St. Stephen's could do would help contribute towards that. Just cinched the whole thing, I think, for Milton and I as we walked around.
So from the point of view of the teachers, what was going on with them when this collaboration started to happen?
The teachers were coming in, donating their own time in the morning. When I first went to the school, it was their own money that they were donating to keep the program going. And it was just a very small group of children. But it was the children that definitely needed some kind of really urgent intervention. And they came, and they also provide games, and this is part of what the church has also provided, is support for the games library. So they put the games out in the morning, and it's a socialization time. They play the games with the children, they make the breakfast for the children. In a very limited way it was. Now it's expanded so that now we have a paid food worker that comes in for the hour to do the program, and the menu has greatly expanded
And
from what it was.
this worker makes the breakfast?
She makes the breakfast, and then we have one staff member also that still is in the kitchen and interacting with the children and playing the games with the children.
Just couldn't let go of that feeding and educating.
No.
So, Milton, what about in the church congregation? What were people feeling? What was this all about for them?
They were really quite moved. They thought it was one of the great things that the church has done for a long time.
What do
And,
they mean by that? In what way did they see that as a significant move?
I think they follow the enthusiasm of the committee, that this was an undertaking very much worthwhile. And I think they were a little bit surprised that in this beautiful city of ours, 20 blocks away from us, you have such a contrast. And I think the enthusiasm is bubbling over, and it's been caught, the atmosphere has been caught by the congregation at large. And almost every Sunday, somebody comes up and says, Milton, that's a good job, great job you're doing. And it's very heartwarming that I have the backing of my whole church.
Well, and the name of your committee is interesting too, social concern. You know, it really does say what the committee's work is, or because this is not a typical name in church committees.
I like to also to believe that the word stewardship has a lot of meaning, because we are on this earth as stewards. We can't take anything with us. We are being given this, whatever it is, education, knowledge, wealth, as a trust.
So you talked earlier about some of the members of the church going to the school for breakfast. Now, that was in order for the two communities to meet each other? And what happened there?
Well, I mean, it was just, I guess Nightingale has this sort of pancake breakfast a couple of times a year, and it was relatively soon after the start of the school breakfast program at Nightingale, and we received this really wonderful invitation out of the blue one day in the mail to come, and as many members of the congregation as could join to come on down for that day. So 10 or 12 of us were able to arrange it in our schedules to go down and just be welcomed warmly by the students, by the staff, sort of an initial attempt to integrate the two communities, to begin to make those bridges solidify and build towards something that we hope will last quite a while.
We tried to get Gary to cook the pancakes, but he drew the line at that.
Serving them was all right. Yeah, that was okay.
Yeah, I think we need to ask the children too. So, but if we looked at this creative project that's happened in between Nightingale and St. Stephen's, but if we project that onto our city, what's really going on that there's this need right now, that children are not being fed, children have no food, and private citizens and teachers have to take care of this. What's going on here?
I think that there is a huge need out there that society isn't recognizing, or is only just beginning to recognize. It's a very complex issue. Poverty is not a simple matter, and it needs interagency support and also private sponsorship, and it needs a real community pulling together in order to support our future. And unless we have that kind of pulling together that we're seeing here with this small start, then our children are really going to cost us a lot more in the long run, and society is really going to go downhill. So we're trying to pull it up and really trying to support what's happening.
And as we sort of sense this pulling together and the acknowledgement of the real problems, one of the issues is that the government and the kind of support that has been there historically within the Canadian system for support of this kind of an enterprise is being withdrawn. And it's like we're victimizing the victims again, pulling money away from programs that really do support the families that are at risk.
And so if communities do this, would that mean, what would the consequences be for government as well as other agencies? Well, the community is going to take care of it.
Well, sure, I'd be really afraid that the government would say, we don't have any problem here. If we pull back and pull resources out, the community will meet it with their resources, and therefore we can pull more money out. And we don't want to be seen as kind of trying to accelerate that withdrawal of government support. This is what we hope would be a short-term meeting of needs until the social safety net can be rewoven in a creative way and have,
So what kind
met.
of action are you looking for here? You have your action in place. But what does the rest of the community have to be aware of in terms of what we are able to do that's also ethical in terms of our government and our agencies, our schools, our families?
I think that the whole issue needs us to look at it very, very carefully and build some plans in place for multi-agency, both ministerial and private, to support the future of these children. Not just with the feeding of them, but making them strong emotionally, providing with them the support that they can become lifelong learners.
And Milton, from your perspective, what action would be effective from what you've done, from your community?
I don't think I have any big plans. If I do, the solution would have come forward long before now. But in the meantime, for the short term, we have to provide some
What suggestion do you
support.
have for other communities, whether they're church communities or other social communities?
Well, this type of undertaking is a two-way street. It's not just the kids being blessed. We are also blessed by having known these kids. And I just would like to urge all kind folks out there to join us in giving these kids a break, because it's really a shame that they should go hungry. I mean, it's really unconscionable that this should happen to them.
Okay. So very quickly, what surprises or insights have you received from this experience?
One of the great surprises for me is just how much life and joy and love there is in these inner city schools with caring staff, with programs already in place, with the addition of other kinds of support from the community around or communities around. These are tremendous places to be.
Yeah. So building on it, eh?
Yes.
So let's-
Daily to be in some of these establishments can be a sad experience. There's a lot of joy that happens, but it can be very, very sad. And to know that the support from the community helps us as professionals to keep going and to provide for the children all the love and care that we can.
So less fragmentation of our
Right.
of our,
Yes.
our roles in society.
Yeah.
Joining more.
I just have great admiration for the teachers
Yeah.
and the staff. They do a lot more than just teaching. They are the surrogate parents, sisters and brothers, and I think we should support the teachers in their endeavor.
Well, thank you very much, Milton, Liz, and Gary. Thank you for joining us on Pressure Point. If you would like more information about this program, please call or write to the Audiovisual Educational Library.
The preceding program was produced through the facilities of Rogers Community 4, Vancouver. We want to hear from you and invite you to leave your comments and suggestions on our 24-hour response line message machine. Please call 731-5812.